A virgin at 19, humiliated on her graduation day, until a billionaire stood up and did the unthinkable. But what happened next wasn't just revenge. It was destiny, as a mysterious billionaire in the back row was about to transform this humiliation into the most powerful moment of redemption ever witnessed. Have you ever worked your entire life for one perfect moment, only to have someone you trusted teared away from you in front of everyone who mattered? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The entire auditorium of 2,000 people fell silent as a drunk man stood up during graduation and screamed the two words that would destroy a young woman's proudest moment. Have you ever worked your entire life for one perfect moment, only to have someone you trusted tear it away from you in front of everyone who mattered? But what happened next wasn't just revenge. It was destiny, as a mysterious billionaire in the back row was about to transform this humiliation into the most powerful moment of redemption ever witnessed. If you've ever been knocked down when you deserve to be lifted up, this story will show you that sometimes your darkest moment is just setting the stage for your greatest victory. Hit that like button if you believe karma is real, because what you're about to witness will restore your faith in justice. Let me take you back to where this incredible journey of transformation began. At 3:17 a.m., while most 19-year-olds were either asleep or stumbling home from parties, Amara Williams sat hunched over her laptop in the cramped kitchen of a Phoenix apartment, her fingers dancing across the keyboard with mechanical precision. Lines of code flowed across the screen, beautiful, logical, perfect, unlike everything else in her life. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but she didn't notice. She'd already worked an 8-hour shift at the campus coffee shop, spent 4 hours tutoring elementary kids in math, and now she was debugging a mobile app for a client who would pay her $300 upon completion. $300 that would cover groceries for 2 weeks and maybe, just maybe, allow her mother to skip one of her double shifts at the hospital. Still playing with that computer like some freak? The slurred voice cut through her concentration like a blade. Derek stood in the doorway, beer bottle in hand, his bloodshot eyes fixed on her with familiar contempt. Her stepfather had perfected the art of making her feel like an intruder in her own home. Amara didn't look up, just finishing some work. Work? He laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. You call this work? You're 19 years old and you've never even been kissed. What kind of freak reaches 19 without even knowing what it feels like to have someone want them? Her fingers paused on the keyboard. She'd heard this speech before, variations of it, anyway. Derek had discovered her inexperience with relationships months ago and wielded it like a weapon whenever he wanted to hurt her. Your real daddy abandoned you because he knew you'd turn out like this, Derek continued, taking another swig. Weird, unlovable. No one or nobody wants you. You're gonna die alone, just like you should have. The familiar sting of tears threatened behind her eyes, but Amara blinked them away. She learned long ago that showing pain only encouraged him. Instead, she saved her work and closed the laptop. Tomorrow was graduation day. Tomorrow, she would walk across that stage in the emerald dress she'd saved 8 months to buy. The brightest, most beautiful thing she'd ever owned. Tomorrow, she would be recognized as summa cum laude, graduating with a perfect 4.0 GPA while working 3 jobs to keep her family afloat. Tomorrow, Derek's words wouldn't matter anymore. But as she slipped past him toward her bedroom, she caught the calculation in his eyes. The look that meant he was planning something. Something that would ensure her moment of triumph became something else entirely. What Amara didn't know was that in a boardroom 500 miles away, someone else was planning for tomorrow too. The holographic display rotated slowly in the center of the Silicon Valley boardroom, showing market projections that would make most entrepreneurs weep with joy. Xavier Montenegro, at 24, had built an empire that was about to revolutionize artificial intelligence forever. The beta testing exceeded all expectations, his lead developer announced. We're projecting a 400% return on investment in the first quarter alone. The board members nodded approvingly, but Xavier's attention had drifted to the framed photograph on his desk. His mother, Elena Montenegro, smiled back at him from her nursing school graduation photo. The last picture taken before shame and humiliation destroyed her dreams. 25 years ago, Elena had stood on a similar stage, proud in her white nursing uniform, ready to begin her career helping others. She'd worked 3 jobs to put herself through school, studying while raising Xavier alone after his father abandoned them. But when her abusive boyfriend stood up during the ceremony and screamed about her failures as a woman and mother, the laughter that followed shattered something inside her that never quite healed. She died 3 years later, her spirit broken by that moment of public destruction. "Sir," his assistant's voice brought him back to the present. The Arizona State University Computer Science Department sent over their graduate profiles. "You mentioned wanting to scout talent personally?" Xavier straightened. For the past 2 years, he'd made it his mission to attend graduation ceremonies across the country, looking for brilliant minds that might otherwise be overlooked. But more than that, he was searching for someone, anyone, whose moment of triumph he could protect the way no one had protected his mother. "Arizona State has some impressive candidates," his assistant continued, sliding a tablet across the table. "This one particularly caught our attention." Xavier's eyes scanned the profile. Amara Williams, computer science, 4.0 GPA, 3 mobile apps developed independently, works multiple jobs while maintaining perfect academic standing. At the bottom of the page, a note from her professor: "Most innovative problem solver I've encountered in 20 years of teaching." Something about her story resonated deeply. The dedication, the sacrifice, the refusal to let circumstances define her potential. She reminded him of his mother. Brilliant, determined, fighting against a world that seemed designed to knock her down. "Clear my schedule for tomorrow," Xavier said suddenly. "I'm flying to Phoenix." His board members exchanged glances. "Sir, we have a merger meeting with. Reschedule it." Xavier was already reaching for his phone. Some opportunities can't wait. As his private jet was prepared for departure, Xavier had no idea that tomorrow would be the day he finally found the person he'd been searching for. The person whose triumph he would protect, whose potential he would unleash, whose story would become forever intertwined with his own. The emerald dress hung on the back of Amara's bedroom door like a promise. She'd found it on clearance at a department store 8 months ago and had been saving $15 a week ever since to pay it off. The fabric caught the morning light beautifully, transforming her tiny, cluttered room into something that felt almost magical. Today was the day. Amara applied her makeup carefully, covering the dark circles that came from years of sleeping 4 hours a night. She learned to do her own hair from YouTube tutorials, creating an elegant updo that made her look older, more sophisticated. For once in her life, she wanted to look like she belonged with the other graduates. "Mija, you look beautiful." Her mother, Linda, appeared in the doorway, still wearing her hospital scrubs from the night shift. She'd requested the day off, something they couldn't afford, to watch her daughter graduate. Pride radiated from her exhausted features. "Thank you for being here, Mama." Amara's voice caught with emotion. "I know what this cost us." Linda waved dismissively. "My daughter graduating summa cum laude? This is the most important day of my life." From the living room came the sound of bottles clinking. Derek was starting early today, and that never meant anything good. Amara caught her mother's worried glance. "He'll behave," Linda whispered, though her tone suggested she didn't believe it herself. Meanwhile, at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, Xavier Montenegro stepped off his private jet carrying a leather portfolio filled with student profiles. His security detail followed at a respectful distance as he reviewed Amara's information one final time. He'd arrived unannounced, preferring to scout talent without the fanfare that usually accompanied his public appearances. Today wasn't about publicity or business connections. Today was about finding someone whose potential had been overlooked, someone whose moment of triumph deserved protection. His driver navigated the traffic toward Arizona State University while Xavier stared out the window at the sprawling desert city. Somewhere in this urban landscape was a young woman who had no idea her life was about to change forever. Back in the apartment, Derek finished his third beer and studied the graduation program, his eyes narrowing at Amara's name listed among the honors graduates. The sight of her achievements always triggered something dark in him, a rage that she could succeed where he had failed, that she could rise above circumstances that had defeated him. Drop a comment if you can feel the tension building, because what happens next will leave you speechless. As three separate lives converge on the same destination, none of them could predict the explosion that was about to reshape everything they thought they knew about justice, redemption, and the power of a single moment to change the world. The auditorium buzzed with excitement as families filled the seats, cameras ready to capture their graduates' proudest moments. Amara Williams sat in the second row with her fellow summa cum laude recipients, her emerald dress standing out like a jewel among the traditional black graduation gowns. She spotted her mother in the audience, beaming with pride despite her obvious exhaustion. Next to Linda sat Derek, slouched and scowling, a flask barely concealed in his jacket pocket. Amara's stomach tightened, but she forced herself to focus on the positive. Nothing could ruin this day. In the back of the auditorium, Xavier Montenegro took a seat where he could observe without drawing attention. He'd reviewed the program and knew Amara would be recognized early in the ceremony. His portfolio contained preliminary scholarship offers for 3 students, but something about Amara's story had captured his attention completely. Ladies and gentlemen, the dean announced, we now recognize our summa cum laude graduates, students who maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA while demonstrating exceptional leadership and innovation. Amara's heart thundered as her name was called. She stood gracefully, her emerald dress flowing as she walked toward the stage. For the first time in her life, she felt truly beautiful, truly accomplished, truly worthy of celebration. The applause was warm and generous. Her professors smiled from the side of the stage. Her mother's tears of joy were visible even from a distance. This was her moment, the culmination of years of sacrifice, sleepless nights, and unwavering determination. As she reached for her recognition certificate, the unthinkable happened. Virgin loser. Derek's voice cut through the auditorium like a gunshot. He stood unsteadily, pointing directly at Amara, his face twisted with malicious satisfaction. Look at her, 19 years old and never been touched by a man. What kind of freak graduates without ever being wanted by anybody? The auditorium fell into stunned silence. 2,000 people turned to stare as Amara froze on the stage, her face burning with humiliation. The certificate slipped from her trembling fingers. Derek continued his assault, his voice carrying across the silent space. She thinks she's better than everyone, but she's just a weird little girl who's gonna die alone, just like her daddy knew she would. Nervous laughter began to ripple through parts of the audience. Some people looked away in embarrassment, while others pulled out phones to record the spectacle. Amara's moment of triumph had become a public execution. Tears streamed down her face as she stumbled backward, her emerald dress suddenly feeling like a costume, like evidence of her desperate attempt to be something she wasn't. Her mother's mortified expression was visible across the room, and the professors on stage looked helplessly between Amara and the disruption in the audience. Security began moving toward Derek, but the damage was done. Amara turned to flee the stage, her perfect moment shattered into 1,000 pieces that could never be put back together. But in the back row, Xavier Montenegro was standing up. His mother's face flashed before his eyes. The same humiliation, the same public destruction, the same moment when triumph became torture. Not again, not while he had the power to stop it. Xavier began walking toward the stage, his jaw set with quiet determination. Today, history would not repeat itself. The auditorium held its breath as a figure in an expensive suit strode down the center aisle with quiet authority. Most of the audience didn't recognize him, but his presence commanded attention in a way that made people instinctively straighten in their seats. Xavier Montenegro climbed the steps to the stage where Amara stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. The dean started to protest, but Xavier's calm confidence suggested he belonged there. Without hesitation, Xavier took the microphone from the stunned dean's hands. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice carried clearly across the silent auditorium, "you've just witnessed something that should disgust every person in this room." Derek's drunken laughter died instantly. Security had reached him but hesitated, unsure whether to remove him while this unexpected speaker commanded the stage. Xavier continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "You've watched a man attempt to destroy what may be the most remarkable young woman to graduate from this institution in decades." He turned to face Amara, whose tears had slowed as confusion replaced humiliation. "Amara Williams," Xavier said, his voice carrying both authority and warmth, graduated summa cum laude while working 3 jobs to support her family. She developed 3 mobile applications that generated over $50,000 in revenue. Money she used not for herself, but to ensure her mother could reduce her shifts at the hospital. The audience began to murmur, their perspective shifting as they learned details that shame had prevented them from considering. She maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA while tutoring elementary students, coding freelance projects until 3 a.m., and serving coffee to her fellow students who had the luxury of focusing solely on their studies. Xavier's voice carried across the now silent auditorium. She achieved in 4 years what most people couldn't accomplish with unlimited resources and no obstacles. Amara stared at him in wonder, unable to comprehend how this stranger knew so much about her life, or why he was defending her when her own family had just tried to destroy her. Xavier faced the audience again. This brilliant woman just proved that character, determination, and intelligence matter more than any social milestone manufactured by a society that values conformity over achievement. His next words made the entire auditorium gasp, which is why I'm offering Amara Williams a full scholarship to complete her master's degree at Stanford University, plus a position as Vice President of Innovation at Montenegro Technologies, with a starting salary of $250,000. The silence was deafening. Even Derek's mouth hung open in shock. "Furthermore," Xavier continued, pulling out his phone, "I'm establishing a $2 million endowment in her name to support students who achieve academic excellence despite personal hardships." Amara's legs nearly gave out. This couldn't be real. Moments ago, she'd been fleeing the stage in humiliation, and now Xavier turned back to her, extending his hand. "Amara Williams, you represent everything that's right about dedication, intelligence, and refusing to let circumstances define your worth. The question is, are you ready to show the world what you're truly capable of?" With shaking hands, she reached out and took his offer handshake. The auditorium erupted in thunderous applause. Not the mocking laughter of minutes before, but genuine admiration and celebration. As flashbulbs erupted throughout the auditorium and people rose to their feet, Derek's face contorted with rage. His plan to humiliate Amara had backfired spectacularly, but his fury was far from spent. Security finally reached him as he lunged toward the stage, screaming incoherently about ungrateful children and publicity stunts. But Amara no longer heard him. She was staring into the eyes of the man who had just transformed her nightmare into a dream she never dared imagine. Security guards wrestled Derek toward the exit as he screamed threats that made half the audience recoil in horror. His fury had transformed into something dangerous, something that promised this confrontation was far from over. "I'll destroy you both," he bellowed, spittle flying from his lips. "You think you can humiliate me? Make me look like a fool? This isn't finished." But his voice was drowned out by the chaos that had erupted throughout the auditorium. Smartphones appeared everywhere, recording the unprecedented scene as graduates abandoned their seats to get closer to the stage. Parents who moments earlier had been quietly judging Amara now pushed forward, eager to shake hands with the billionaire who had just made their local graduation ceremony international news. Xavier maintained his protective position near Amara as reporters materialized seemingly from thin air. Questions flew from every direction. "Mr. Montenegro, What brought you to Phoenix today? Is this a publicity stunt for your company? How did you know about Miss Williams' achievements? The dean attempted to restore order, but the ceremony had effectively ended. Most of the other graduates would later complain that their own moments had been overshadowed, but none would deny they'd witnessed something extraordinary. Backstage, away from the frenzy, Xavier pressed his business card into Amara's trembling hands. Her emerald dress was wrinkled now, stained with tears, but her eyes held a spark that hadn't been there an hour earlier. "This is real," he said quietly, his voice cutting through her shock. "The offer, the scholarship, the position, all of it. You've earned this through your work, not through what happened out there." Linda appeared at her daughter's side, having fought her way through security. Her face showed a mixture of awe, gratitude, and maternal concern. "Mija, I don't understand what just happened." "Your daughter's life just changed forever," Xavier replied. "The question now is whether she's ready for what comes next." But even as he spoke those words, Xavier's phone was already buzzing with notifications. The video of Derek's outburst and Xavier's response was spreading across social media at lightning speed. Hashtag graduation intervention was trending within minutes, with millions of views accumulating faster than anyone could track. What none of them realized was that viral fame came with a price none of them were prepared to pay. By evening, Amara Williams would be one of the most recognizable faces in America. By morning, she would discover that internet fame attracted both supporters and predators in equal measure. Derek's threat echoed in the empty auditorium long after the crowds dispersed. "This isn't finished." He was right. This was only the beginning of a war that would test everything Xavier thought he knew about protecting the innocent, and everything Amara thought she knew about the cost of achieving her dreams. The internet moved faster than wildfire. Within 6 hours of the graduation ceremony, the video had been viewed 12 million times across multiple platforms. Hashtag graduation intervention dominated trending topics, but the responses were far from universally positive. Amara discovered this harsh reality while hiding in her childhood bedroom, scrolling through comment after comment that made Derek's public humiliation seem almost kind by comparison. "Fake and staged," read the top comment with 50,000 likes. "Billionaires don't just show up at random graduations. This is obviously a publicity stunt. She probably paid him to do this," wrote another user. "Poor little virgin needed someone to save her reputation. Why didn't she stand up for herself? Weak women like this don't deserve executive positions." The hate multiplied exponentially. Anonymous accounts doxed her address, her mother's workplace, even her childhood schools. Photos of her apartment building appeared online with cruel captions about poverty tourism and victim mentality. Meanwhile, Xavier's company faced its own backlash. Montenegro Technologies stock dropped 8% in after-hours trading as investors questioned his judgment. Major shareholders demanded emergency meetings. His board members sent increasingly frantic emails about damage control and reputation management. "Sir," his assistant reported during an emergency conference call, "3 major news outlets are requesting interviews about your White Knight complex." The Wall Street Journal is preparing a piece about billionaire savior syndrome. But the real devastation was happening in Phoenix, where Linda Williams received a termination notice from a hospital. Due to recent media attention creating disruption in the workplace, the letter read, "Your employment is terminated effective immediately." Derek had been released on bail and returned home with renewed viciousness. The viral video had made him a national laughingstock, and his rage needed a target. When he discovered that Linda had lost her job, his satisfaction was audible throughout the thin apartment walls. "See what your freak daughter has done now," he taunted. "She's destroyed our whole family for some rich man's publicity stunt. Hope that fancy job offer was worth making us homeless." Amara sat on her bed, laptop closed, staring at the business card Xavier had given her. $250,000 salary, VP position, Stanford scholarship. It all seemed impossible now, tainted by the hatred of strangers who had decided her story was fiction. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Kill yourself? Fake virgin." The world doesn't need more lying attention seekers. Another message appeared immediately after. We know where you live. Stop pretending to be a victim. The threats were becoming specific, detailed, frightening. Someone had found her social media account from high school and was sharing photos with cruel commentary about her appearance, her clothes, her obvious poverty. At Montenegro Technologies headquarters, Xavier stared at similar messages flooding his company's social media accounts. Death threats, boycott campaigns, accusations of everything from tax evasion to human trafficking. His phone rang. Amara's number. Mr. Montenegro. Her voice was barely a whisper. I think I need to decline your offer. The line went silent except for the sound of her quiet crying. They're saying terrible things. My mother lost her job. People are threatening us. Maybe Derek was right. Maybe I don't deserve any of this. Xavier's jaw tightened. He'd seen this before. The way the internet could destroy someone's spirit faster than any physical attack. The war for Amara's future was just beginning. Sleep had become impossible. Amara lay in her childhood bed, watching the numbers climb on her phone screen. Death threats now exceeded supportive messages by a ratio of 10 to 1. Outside, news vans lined the street like mechanical vultures, their satellite dishes reaching toward a sky that felt lower and more oppressive with each passing hour. Derek's voice carried through the thin walls as he spoke to reporters who'd offered him money for his side of the story. His newfound celebrity status had transformed his humiliation into opportunity, and he was milking every moment of attention. She's always been manipulative. His slurred voice drifted through the apartment. Probably seduced that rich man somehow. You don't know what she's really like behind closed doors. Each lie felt like a physical blow. Amara pulled her pillow over her head, but the shame still found its way through. Her laptop showed 47 missed calls from Xavier Montenegro. She hadn't answered any of them. At Montenegro Technologies, Xavier was fighting battles on multiple fronts. His board had called an emergency meeting. His largest investor was threatening to pull funding, and his company's reputation was being shredded in real time across every business publication in the country. Sir, his assistant announced, your mother's nursing school has issued a statement distancing themselves from recent publicity stunts involving their alumni families. The betrayal cut deeper than any business loss. Even his mother's memory was being weaponized against him. But Xavier's focus remained laser-sharp on one priority, getting through to Amara before she made a decision that would haunt her forever. His fourth attempt to visit her apartment was blocked by police barriers and media crowds. Photographers shouted questions about his savior complex and manufactured charity. One reporter thrust a microphone toward his car window. Mr. Montenegro, critics are saying you exploited a vulnerable young woman for publicity. How do you respond? Xavier didn't respond. He couldn't explain that this wasn't about publicity. It was about keeping a promise to a dead woman who'd never lived to see justice for her own humiliation. Meanwhile, Amara faced an ultimatum that would define the rest of her life. Derek stood in her doorway, steadier than she'd seen him in months. Sobriety made him more dangerous, not less. Here's how this works, he said, his voice deadly calm. You call that rich boy and tell him you were lying. Tell him you made up your sob story for attention. Tell him you don't want his charity. I never lied about anything. Or, Derek continued as if she hadn't spoken, I make sure every reporter out there knows exactly what kind of family you really come from. Your mother's drinking problem when you were little. The time you wet yourself in 6th grade. Every embarrassing moment I've watched for 7 years. His smile was predatory. I'll destroy what's left of your reputation so completely that no one will ever hire you for anything. Your choice. Linda appeared behind him, her face streaked with tears. She'd aged 10 years in 2 days. Amara, her mother whispered, maybe it would be easier if you just... No. Amara's voice was stronger than she felt. I won't let him win. Derek's expression darkened. Then you've chosen war. That night, Amara made a decision that would change everything. She grabbed her laptop, her phone, and the emerald dress that started it all. By morning, she was gone. The Silicon Valley offices of Montenegro Technologies occupied 40 floors of gleaming steel and glass, each level representing millions of dollars in cutting-edge innovation. Amara Williams stood in the lobby at 6 a.m., clutching a single duffel bag and wearing the same emerald dress that had witnessed both her humiliation and salvation. She'd driven through the night, using the last $200 in her savings account for gas, running on nothing but determination and caffeine from gas station coffee. The security guard looked skeptical when she mentioned Xavier Montenegro's name, but a quick phone call changed his entire demeanor. Within minutes, she was ascending in an elevator that moved so smoothly she barely felt the motion. The contrast with her previous life was jarring. Here, even the air felt expensive. Xavier was waiting when the elevator doors opened on the executive floor. He looked like he hadn't slept either, his usually perfect appearance slightly disheveled, concern etched deep in his features. "You came," he said simply. "I almost didn't." Amara's voice was hoarse from crying and exhaustion. Derek made good on his threats. "The local news is running a story about our family's dark secrets. Most of it's lies, but lies spread faster than truth on the internet," Xavier finished. "I know. My team has been monitoring the situation." He led her through corridors lined with awards and patents, past conference rooms where brilliant minds were already solving problems she couldn't even comprehend. The magnitude of what she was stepping into felt overwhelming. "Your mother?" he asked gently. "Safe. I got her into a women's shelter before I left. Derek doesn't know where she is." Amara's voice caught. "She didn't want me to go. Said it wasn't worth destroying our family." "And what do you think?" Amara stopped walking and faced him directly. "I think Derek destroyed our family years ago. I think my mother deserves better than living in fear. And I think maybe I deserve better than spending my life apologizing for being smart." Xavier's smile was the first genuine warmth she'd seen in days. "Then let me show you what better looks like." The development lab was unlike anything Amara had ever imagined. Holographic displays showed complex algorithms in three-dimensional space. Engineers collaborated with artificial intelligence systems that responded to voice commands and gesture controls. The technology was at least 5 years ahead of anything she'd studied in school. "This is where you'll work," Xavier explained, leading her to a workstation that probably cost more than her family's annual income. "Your job isn't charity, Amara. We need someone who thinks differently, who sees problems from angles that wealth and privilege can't teach." For the first time since the graduation ceremony, Amara felt something other than fear or shame. She felt curiosity, excitement, the irresistible pull of challenges that would push her abilities to their limits. But as she settled into her new reality, Xavier's phone buzzed with a message that made his expression darken. "What is it?" Amara asked. Xavier showed her the screen. A single text from an unknown number. "We know where she is now. This isn't over. Derek had found her. The war was coming to Silicon Valley." The Montenegro Technologies lobby had been designed to impress, with its soaring ceilings, digital art installations, and waterfall that cascaded down a living wall. It was not designed to handle a drunk, belligerent man demanding to see the lying whore who stole my family. Derek Martinez stood in the center of the pristine space like a stain on white marble. His clothes wrinkled from the cross-country bus ride, his eyes bloodshot from days of drinking and rage. Security guards flanked him, unsure whether to escort him out or wait for instructions from above. "I know she's here," Derek's voice echoed off the glass surfaces. "Amara Williams. Come down here and face what you've done to your family." 40 floors above, Amara watched the scene unfold through security monitors, her face pale as she recognized the man who had haunted her dreams for 7 years. Even through the digital feed, Derek's presence made her feel small and frightened again. "He can't reach you here," Xavier said quietly, but his own tension was visible in the rigid set of his shoulders. "You don't understand," Amara whispered. "He doesn't give up, ever. He'll camp out there until someone listens to him, and he'll make sure every reporter in the city knows exactly where to find me." She was right. Within an hour, news vans began arriving. Derek had called every media outlet in the Bay Area, promising them exclusive access to the real story behind the graduation stunt. His transformation from anonymous stepfather to media personality was complete. By noon, he was giving interviews on the sidewalk outside Montenegro Technologies, painting himself as the victim of an elaborate hoax designed to make him look bad. "She's been planning this for months," Derek told a reporter from Channel 7 News. "Probably been in contact with Montenegro's people for weeks. You think it's a coincidence he just happened to be at that graduation? They're playing you all for fools." The lies were sophisticated now, crafted for maximum damage. Derek had learned to manipulate the media the same way he'd manipulated his family for years. Inside the building, Amara's co-workers began to stare. Whispered conversations followed her through the hallways. The question everyone was asking became unavoidable. Was their new VP really the fraud her stepfather claimed she was? Xavier's assistant delivered the news that made the situation even worse. "Sir, 3 board members are demanding Miss Williams' immediate suspension pending an investigation. They're saying the company can't afford any more negative publicity." Amara stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the man who had followed her across the country to destroy her future. Derek's presence had transformed her sanctuary into a prison. "I should go," she said finally, "before he destroys your company too." Xavier's response was immediate and firm. "Absolutely not." But even as he spoke those words, his phone was ringing with calls from investors, board members, and business partners who were beginning to question whether protecting Amara Williams was worth the cost. The battle for her future was escalating, and Derek held more weapons than anyone had anticipated. The entire auditorium of 2,000 people fell silent as a drunk man stood up during graduation and screamed the 2 words that would destroy a young woman's proudest moment. Have you ever worked your entire life for one perfect moment, only to have someone you trusted teared away from you in front of everyone who mattered? But what happened next wasn't just revenge. It was destiny, as a mysterious billionaire in the back row was about to transform this humiliation into the most powerful moment of redemption ever witnessed. If you've ever been knocked down when you deserve to be lifted up, this story will show you that sometimes your darkest moment is just setting the stage for your greatest victory. Hit that like button if you believe karma is real, because what you're about to witness will restore your faith in justice. Let me take you back to where this incredible journey of transformation began. The Montenegro Technologies building stood 40 stories tall, but Amara felt most at home in the basement laboratory where she and Xavier spent their late nights developing revolutionary AI algorithms. Tonight, like so many others, they worked side by side while the rest of Silicon Valley slept. "Your pattern recognition system is 3 years ahead of anything our competitors have developed," Xavier said, reviewing her latest code. "How did you even conceive this approach?" Amara looked up from her workstation, her eyes bright with the excitement that always accompanied her breakthrough moments. Growing up in chaos teaches you to identify patterns others miss. When your survival depends on predicting someone's mood swings, you develop different ways of processing information. It was the first time she directly connected her technical abilities to her traumatic upbringing, and the vulnerability in her voice made Xavier pause. Over the past months, their working relationship had evolved into something deeper, a friendship built on mutual respect and shared understanding of what it meant to transform pain into purpose. "My mother used to say that," Xavier replied quietly. "She could predict my father's violent episodes hours before they happened, just by reading micro-expressions and vocal patterns. I used those same skills to identify market trends that other investors missed." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, their synchronized movements around the lab reflecting how naturally they complemented each other. Amara's innovative thinking paired perfectly with Xavier's business acumen and resources. "Can I ask you something personal?" Amara said eventually, her voice barely above a whisper. Xavier nodded, sensing the importance of whatever she was about to share. "Do you ever wonder if we're broken? If the things that happened to us made us incapable of normal relationships?" The question hung between them, loaded with years of fear and self-doubt. Xavier set down his tablet and turned to face her fully. "I used to think that," he admitted. I convinced myself that emotional walls were actually strategic advantages, that caring too much about people would make me weak. What changed your mind? Xavier's answer came without hesitation. You did. The words created an electric tension in the air between them. For months, they had carefully maintained professional boundaries while their personal connection grew stronger. But tonight felt different, more honest, more dangerous. Amara, Xavier continued, stepping closer. You're the most genuine person I've ever met. You've achieved incredible things while maintaining your compassion and integrity. If that's what broken looks like, then maybe broken is actually perfect. She searched his face, looking for any sign that he was simply being kind. Instead, she found something that terrified and thrilled her. The same attraction she'd been fighting for months. I've never, she started, then stopped, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. I know, Xavier said gently. And that doesn't matter to me. What matters is who you are, not what you've experienced or haven't experienced. The distance between them seemed to shrink without either of them moving. For the first time in her life, Amara felt truly seen by someone who valued her for exactly who she was. But before either could act on the moment, Xavier's phone buzzed with an urgent message that would shatter their peaceful bubble and thrust them back into conflict. Derek Williams had just been released on bail, and he was heading their way. The courthouse steps had become a battlefield, with protesters holding signs reading "Justice for Amara," facing off against Derek's few remaining supporters who claimed the entire situation was a publicity stunt. News vans lined the street as reporters prepared for the most anticipated verdict in recent Phoenix history. Inside the courtroom, Derek Williams sat slumped at the defendant's table, his expensive attorney whispering urgent strategies in his ear. 6 months of legal proceedings had drained his savings and destroyed his reputation. But his hatred for Amara had only intensified. Xavier sat in the gallery, his security team positioned strategically throughout the room. The death threats against both him and Amara had escalated dramatically since Derek's arrest, requiring constant protection that felt surreal to a young woman who had once been invisible to the world. Amara entered the courtroom wearing the same emerald dress from her graduation. Not as a victim this time, but as a symbol of transformation. The fabric that had once represented her destroyed dreams now embodied her complete victory over the forces that had tried to break her. The judge's voice cut through the tension. In the matter of the people versus Derek Williams, on the charges of criminal harassment, domestic emotional abuse, and violation of restraining orders, how does the jury find? The foreman stood slowly. We find the defendant guilty on all charges. Derek's face contorted with rage as the words registered. His final gambit to destroy Amara through legal manipulation had failed spectacularly, leaving him with nothing but the bitter taste of defeat. But the verdict was only the beginning of his punishment. Furthermore, the judge continued, this court is issuing a permanent restraining order requiring Mr. Williams to maintain a distance of at least 500 feet from Ms. Williams, her mother, and her place of employment. Any violation will result in immediate imprisonment. The gallery erupted in applause, but Amara felt only quiet satisfaction. Justice wasn't about revenge. It was about ensuring Derek could never hurt anyone else the way he had hurt her family. As they left the courthouse, Xavier took her hand for the first time in public. The simple gesture sent photographers into a frenzy, but Amara no longer cared about media attention or public opinion. How does it feel? Xavier asked as they walked through the crowd of supporters who had gathered to celebrate her victory. Like I can finally breathe, Amara replied, her voice filled with wonder. For the first time in my life, I'm not afraid. That evening, as they stood on the balcony of Xavier's penthouse overlooking the city lights, he pulled out a small velvet box that made Amara's heart skip several beats. I know this might seem fast, Xavier said, his usual confidence replaced by nervous energy, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. He dropped to one knee as the woman who had transformed his understanding of strength and courage watched in amazement. Amara Williams, you've shown me that the best partnerships aren't built on perfection. They're built on the courage to be vulnerable with someone who sees your true worth. Will you marry me? through tears of joy rather than pain. Amara whispered the word that would complete her transformation from victim to victor. Yes. The scared girl who had once believed she was unlovable had become a woman who knew exactly how much she was worth. And it was everything. The engagement announcement broke the internet within hours, but Amara Williams Montenegro, she had legally changed her name the week before, no longer paid attention to social media storms. She was too busy revolutionizing the tech industry from her corner office at Montenegro Technologies, where her AI innovations had generated over $200 million in new revenue. The wedding took place exactly 1 year after Derek's conviction, in the same auditorium where Amara's nightmare had become her salvation. But this time, the space was transformed with white roses and emerald accents, a deliberate reclaiming of a location where her life had changed forever. Linda Williams walked her daughter down the aisle, tears of pride streaming down her face. She had remarried 6 months earlier to Robert Chun, a kind-hearted hospital administrator she'd met in a support group for families of abuse survivors. Their whirlwind romance proved that healing was possible at any age. Xavier waited at the altar wearing the same confident expression that had captivated an auditorium full of people. But his eyes held something deeper now, the contentment of a man who had found his perfect partner. As they exchanged vows, Amara reflected on the journey that had brought them together. The scared 19-year-old who had fled a graduation stage and humiliation had evolved into a woman who commanded boardrooms, inspired millions, and loved fearlessly. "Xavier," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the packed auditorium, "you taught me that my greatest strength wasn't surviving what happened to me. It was choosing to thrive despite it. You saw my worth when I couldn't see it myself." Xavier's response brought the entire audience to tears. "Amara, you've shown me that real power isn't about wealth or influence. It's about lifting others up when they're at their lowest point. You've made me a better man simply by being exactly who you are." The kiss that sealed their union received a standing ovation from an audience that included tech industry leaders, abuse survivors, scholarship recipients, and the same professors who had watched Amara's humiliation transform into triumph. But the most meaningful moment came during the reception when Amara addressed the crowd. 2 years ago, I stood on this same stage believing I was fundamentally broken, she said, her voice steady and strong. Tonight, I want every person who has ever been told they're not enough to understand something important. Your worst moment might just be the setup for your greatest victory. The Montenegro Foundation had already distributed $50 million in scholarships to abuse survivors pursuing STEM degrees. 3 major universities had established programs based on Amara's model of combining academic excellence with emotional healing. As the couple shared their first dance to the song they had been listening to during their late-night coding sessions, Derek Williams watched from his prison cell, finally understanding that his attempt to destroy Amara had only made her stronger. Love had conquered fear, truth had defeated manipulation, and the girl who was told she would die alone was surrounded by hundreds of people celebrating her happiness. 5 years later, Amara Montenegro returned to Arizona State University as the keynote speaker for the same computer science graduation where her journey had begun. But this time, she stood before the audience as the CEO of Montenegro Technologies, her emerald power suit a deliberate echo of the dress that had once made her feel beautiful and vulnerable. The auditorium was packed beyond capacity, with thousands more watching the live stream of the woman whose story had become legendary in Silicon Valley and beyond. In the front row sat her husband Xavier, their 2-year-old daughter Elena perched on his lap, and Linda Chun, now a published author whose memoir about surviving emotional abuse had topped bestseller lists. Class of 2029, Amara began, her voice carrying the same quiet authority that had once commanded a courtroom. "I want to tell you about the difference between surviving and thriving." She spoke about the night she had coded until 3 a.m. while being told she was worthless. About the morning she had put on an emerald dress, hoping to feel beautiful. About the moment when humiliation had nearly destroyed her dreams. "The man who tried to break me taught me something valuable, though he never intended to," Amara continued. He showed me that other people's opinions of your worth are just noise. What matters is the truth you build for yourself through your choices, your persistence, and your refusal to let circumstances define your potential. In the audience, she spotted a young woman in the front row whose eyes held the same mixture of hope and fear that Amara had once carried. After the ceremony, she would personally hand that student a Montenegro Foundation scholarship, one of hundreds distributed annually to support brilliant minds facing impossible circumstances. The standing ovation lasted for 10 minutes, but Amara's favorite moment came when she looked up at the balcony where a framed photograph of Elena Montenegro, Xavier's mother, watched over the ceremony. The woman whose humiliation had driven Xavier to protect others would have been proud to see how far her son's mission had traveled. As Amara walked off the stage, she passed the exact spot where Derek had once stood to destroy her. Today, that space was occupied by scholarship recipients whose education had been funded by the Montenegro Foundation, living proof that cruelty could be transformed into compassion, that pain could become purpose, that the girl who was told she would die alone had instead created a legacy that would outlive them all. What part of this incredible transformation inspired you most? Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories proving that your worst moment might just be the setup for your greatest triumph.